Good evening. In this edition of Thinkly Talks, we are back with Jaspreet in his community, Plurality Dialogues. Hey, Jaspreet, good to be back with you.
Good to be back. It's been a while. Great to be here.
Yeah. So, what have you been up to over the last 2 weeks?
Well, take one guess. It's usually traveling or falling sick. So, this time was a combination of both a little bit. I've been traveling a lot,
Right.
talking about AI in various places. And I've just come in home today after 7 days, so it feels good.
Fantastic. So, I think some more conversation on AI right now to kick off your return back home. So, as always, let's quickly do a quick dive about what happened. It's been a little bit of a, what should I say, slow OI, slow AI fortnight. But let's just double down on that, right? Give me a second. All right. So, so let's just try and double down as to what really happened in AI over the last 2 weeks. So to kick this off, as always, Satya continues to play his 4D chess, another level. And this time there's this whole report, I think just broke today morning, right? About Microsoft making an investment really in really about trying to kind of, secure its position in Middle East, So, just read your thoughts around this one.
Yeah, this is very interesting, Vivek, and as always, a bit unanticipated, but then when in retrospect, very logical.
Yeah.
I have been actually visiting the UAE reasonably often these days, and probably would have been there 4 or 5 times in the last 18 months. And one of the reasons is because their ambition, UAE's ambition to emerge as the third country of AI. So, the first two we know, okay, are US and China. And then everyone is jostling for third place, France, UK, Canada. And then there's this surprise entrant, UAE. And what the UAE did was 4 or 5 years back, seeded a company called G42. And by the way, the 42 there comes from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And
Right.
G42, which is pretty much government owned, and I think it was seeded with $800 million, so it has a lot of money. And they kind of have been working at this for a while. They became famous when they worked with this company called Cerebras in the US to create two world-class large language models, Falcon and then Giants. And so it's a very credible company, big company, and doing a lot of stuff. Now, obviously, this deal makes sense from two perspectives. One, as you said, for Microsoft to have a strong foothold in the Middle East, where their ambitions to be the third country of AI, so they need to be there. They can't be in the second. And also, obviously, there's a lot of money there, which would always help. But the other one, which is more interesting, is the geopolitical angle.
Yeah.
And the US has, over the past few months, put a huge amount of pressure on to dissociate itself from China, which it was doing a lot of business with, and to choose, frankly. And I think after a lot of hand-wringing, UAE has chosen to be in the US camp, and they're doing many things, and this is kind of one more seal of, one more way that they have done so. So this is where Microsoft now is kind of working with the US government, and this is the clearest intention of AI and geopolitics not being
Right.
divorced from each other.
Yeah. This is something, the game is really being played at a level way above our pay grade right now, right? I mean, I'm sure there's something to do with the US government involvement, and I think all the nudges that have been happening. Around the same time, Jaspreet, there was this other news that came in about OpenAI opening up its first office in Japan, first office in Asia, and that they kind of chose Japan, right? And pretty much, I think you can kind of see all of this happening because China, in some ways, has always been very, very decoupled from the rest of the world. And if you really want to kind of, even for example, on the mobile side, for the longest, iPhone and didn't really make a inroad out there. Of course, that's changed recently. But when you see all of this thing played out, where do you think India falls out here? I mean, it's giving me a big sense of FOMO. I mean, we seem to be kind of, not in anybody's crosshairs. I mean, any thoughts around that?
Well, short answer, nowhere. Okay. And That's
You
the
don't have, you
reality.
don't have to be so brutal, yeah. I mean,
That is the reality. I've been talking a lot about that in this trip. A lot of people have been asking me that, and I've always said, "Do you want the diplomatic answer?" Where I pre-say it with, we have lots of talent, we have lots of whatever,
right.
or the, or just be brutal. Yesterday, in fact, I was on the stage with the two of us, with how can I forget his name, the co-founder of Sarvam,
Mhm.
which to me is the Vivek Raghavan, the co-founder of Sarvam, who's an
Mhm.
amazing individual. And to me, Sarvam is probably the most credible, large Gen AI company coming out of India, large model
Right.
company coming out of India. And you think about it, they're doing amazing stuff, etc. But everyone is oohing and eyeing over their funding, which is $41 million, which, as you know,
Yeah.
is a drop of,
Mhm.
it's not even a drop in the whole ocean that is required. Plus, we talk a lot about these 25,000 GPUs coming in, etc. I think those are lesser than what an inflection would have, the amount of
Correct.
GPUs in the country. Okay,
Right.
and so I'll be very honest. I think we have a lot of good intentions. There's a lot of talk.
Mhm.
There's reasonable amount of entrepreneurial activity, but but the action currently is happening elsewhere in the world, as is evident
Right.
from the last two slides that you showed.
Right. Do you think that, with India really taking the lead when it came to the India stack, when it looked at the identity, then you looked at UPI, I'm sure people out there in the corridors must be thinking about how they really need to up the game, right? And there have been some movements in that direction, but are you aware of anything really happening on that side?
Painfully not. I have been a
Mm.
big votary of that. I call it Jan AI,
Right.
the whole deal of putting Gen AI in the India stack. And very frankly, I've also been beating on doors,
Mm.
knocking on doors, beating on walls.
Right.
And everyone loves the idea, but at least, and I would assume that they're definitely, I mean, we've got very, very good people in those same corridors. And and that, frankly, for me, is the only way for India to make a mark. Not one way, but the only way. I
Right.
mean, we can't do this by creating bigger and bigger language models. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Or by creating chips, $40 billion, $50 billion chip plants, not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that there's something which we are good at, which is the whole DPI, DPG thing, and that's where we should focus on.
Right. Just kind of shifting gears, going back to the updates from typically all these large companies. Meta, for example, announced its Meta AI, which is being tested apparently in WhatsApp. So, what is the sense that you have about the Jaspreet? I saw some chatter in your community about people discussing it, waiting for the API. So where are we on that?
Yeah. So look, now you talk about FOMO. This is where I have FOMO. I still don't have this. Okay, so I think in many ways it's a very logical thing for Meta to do, but it still caught people by surprise. I don't think they talked about it anywhere. Really, there was no pre-announcements or indications that they were going to do something like this. While again, in retrospect, very logical. I mean, they own the best distribution on the internet. With
That's right.
Facebook, with Instagram, and with obviously WhatsApp. And for them to kind of integrate their AI into WhatsApp, much like Google and Microsoft have integrated it in their properties, was the logical thing to do. And they've done that. And I think they've done that well. One, I haven't played around with it, I'll be honest with you. But knowing the success of Llama, their large language model, etc., I'm sure it will be a pretty good product. I mean, the person who showed it to me for the first time, just 3 days back, I was somewhere else, and she said, she's an AI person, and she said, I don't know whether I feel both. My privacy has been violated. I didn't ask for it. Okay, it just landed up and it's there. I really didn't ask for it. But on the other hand, I'm curious. Okay, so I know that I can uninstall it, but I'm curious, so I'm not uninstalling it. So I think, yeah, there should have been some level of, like payments when they introduced in WhatsApp, there was some
Hmm.
permission levels, which I think they have
Right.
fully
Right.
and willfully bypassed, which is part of their core competence. So, but I can't comment on the quality of the product.
Right. I think everybody's kind of looking forward to getting it on their devices, and it'll be interesting how this kind of
Yeah,
shapes up. Yeah.
yeah.
But moving in a slightly different direction, with Meta, this is of course right up the alley, AI and everything. But then there was this announcement about really, a chip that they've kind of, launched right now. It's called the MTIA chip, and it's supposed to be a far more efficient, GPU that's than the ones out there, right? And this, has really been, puzzling me, and I really wanted, to kind of get your sense. I mean, perhaps for the first time, we're seeing this tech giants really trying to build up these vertical stacks, and probably going upstream in a way, or whichever way you look at it, right? This kind of sounds like Compaq and HP making their own chips instead of relying on Intel way back in the 90s, trying to do that. I mean, that never really happened because they really focus on being an assembly, right? You could imagine probably OpenAI trying to do this because they are really in the infrastructure of AI. But to see companies like Meta, which are really a social networking platform, and they're looking at AI just to improve the whole user experience, how do you see all of this fit in?
No, I personally am not surprised at all by this. Okay, well, for one, I think even Meta is in the infrastructure of AI. So they're building the open source infrastructure with Llama, etc. Okay, and actually, well, let me correct myself. Neither OpenAI nor Meta are in the infrastructure of AI. The infrastructure layer is this chip layer. Okay, they
That's
are in
right.
the one layer above that, which is the large language model layer. So I think OpenAI and Meta are in the same layer, frankly.
Hmm.
So is Microsoft. So is Google. Yeah, and so all of them, I think it's not only this chip. Microsoft had Maya, and Google has its tensor processing units, and uh, yeah, those are the three. Amazon has something. So so two things here. One is that the margins in chips, especially the GPU related chips, are too high, and the market is too huge for any of them to ignore. Okay,
Right.
it's capitalism. It's not going to happen. You can't have only Nvidia kind of just doing this rocket ship thing at that scale, just
Right.
because the whole AI infrastructure cannot rest on the back of one company. So this is absolutely, in my opinion, expected. The thing which is interesting is that everyone claims to have higher performances than the Nvidia chips, but still it doesn't make a dent in the market. I mean, AMD
Yeah.
has been saying that for a while, and I believe now two out of the three big clouds don't support AMD because they are not happy with the performance.
Right.
Google has TPUs, but I think the maximum number of chips on the Google Cloud will be NVIDIA chips.
That's true.
Maya is still not launched by Microsoft, but again, I mean, they're the biggest holders. Actually, if you look at the ownership of A100s and this Grace Hopper chips, the two companies which have the most are Microsoft and Meta, not even
Hmm.
Google.
Oh,
So
that's
they're kind of,
surprising.
yeah, Microsoft and Meta. So
Mm.
by far, and so I mean, I don't see this to be a surprise at all. In fact, my surprise is that it still isn't creating a dent in the Nvidia monopoly.
Mm. Interesting. And then, just linked to this whole chip issue, we had this announcement maybe around 2 weeks back, which was about, really the whole consortium trying to kind of come against NVIDIA, which is this whole UXL, which we talked about briefly. I mean, obviously ARM and Intel, Fujitsu, Google, all of them coming together because of this opportunity size being so huge and something that can't be ignored. Any thoughts around this?
But I don't see. I mean, I think the only. I mean, I, I don't. Okay, let me just step back. I don't see this to be a big threat, frankly, to Nvidia. Okay,
Hmm.
some of the big guys aren't there. There's no Amazon. There's no Microsoft. There's no OpenAI. There's no Meta.
There's
Okay,
Google.
well, there's just one guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so and sure, there's ARM, but ARM, Qualcomm have been natural competitors of Nvidia. Okay, and actually, one of the other big guys that I don't see here, which is probably the most credible alternative to Nvidia, is AMD. Okay, it's
Right.
not. So, I mean, I think that sure, again, it's the same thing that whenever there's a natural monopoly, then people do kind of
Mm.
gang up against you in some sense. And I think it's about time that this monopoly gets broken. That's
Right.
why prices of compute are so high. And the other
Right.
word written here, CUDA, is very interesting. CUDA is the software language in a sense which NVIDIA has created. And now most chip designers, etc., are proficient in CUDA. And to
Hmm.
make them, it's like leaving .NET to do other stuff. So,
Right.
it's leaving CUDA to do other stuff is not going to be very simple. So the big moat that NVIDIA has is not only their chips, but also CUDA.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't see this shaking up the world, very frankly, this consortium.
Right. No, well, that was great. I mean, it's a pretty good, getting an insight into really what's happening, and there's too many moving parts, at various levels. But I think today we are on a very interesting topic, which has really been titled as predict versus, verdict. Uh, so, Jaspreet, I think maybe you could just talk to your viewers about it, right? You have this whole habit about sharing your predictions for the year, and this time very smartly you decided to just keep it to a quarter because a year is too long a measure right now, right? So why don't you just walk us through that? What were your thoughts beyond sharing these predictions every year?
And there was no smartness, frankly, it was pressure. Okay, so anyway, so every year for the last 5 years or so, I've been doing these predictions, tech predictions, at the beginning of the year. I actually published them in some newspaper, usually Mint. This year
Right,
was some other newspaper. But I usually publish them so that they're there. I mean, I can be held accountable to them.
right,
And this time, obviously, I didn't do tech predictions. I did AI predictions. Oh, yeah. And by the way, every year I then go back to them at the end of the year, okay, and publish an article saying that, look, how did I fare? I actually score myself how much out of 100 or whatever. Okay.
right,
This year, and I usually am between 60, 70 kind of stuff. This year, I did in AI. And as I wrote in my predictions itself, it was an extremely foolhardy thing to do.
mm,
Uh, for example, I never thought about Sora. Sora suddenly came out of the blue.
right,
Okay. And things changed so fast. So I did these 10 predictions. But the but things are moving so fast that, by the end of the year, it would be irrelevant in many ways to go back to these predictions. And so I went back to them at the end of a quarter and have
right.
published those. And that's the verdict bit that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're going to just, try and just, cover some of these, very interesting predictions. And, but by the way, Jaspreet, I love the way you go public with some of these things, whether it's predictions or especially when there was this post of yours where you asked, ChatGPT to kind of roast you, and really talk about like, I don't know whether you remember that, but that was really hilarious and very bold. And I think ChatGPT did a pretty good job at that point in time, right? Uh, that was like what, some 4 months back?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
about 4 months
I,
back.
I, I, yeah, sorry,
In
go
fact, I
ahead.
made another prediction which I drastically failed in, which is the 11th prediction, not in the 10th. Do ask me at the end. Let's leave that for the
Sure,
end.
sure. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of, casually go through. This is, like you said, was the one that was, you published in Mint. And, so I think the first one, I think you were really bang on, right? Tech was rage, right? And I think you gave yourself a 10 on 10. Walk us through your thoughts around this one.
Well, this was an easy one, right? So that, the tech wars would happen. And within those, there was some specific stuff about
Mhm.
Google suffering and then coming back. And, and look, I think with every fundamental new technology, tech industry landscape gets reshaped. The top 10 companies don't remain the top 10 companies. That happened with the internet and how retail and entertainment and information and news was the companies which were there of those in the top 10 dropped out of the top 10 with the exception of Walmart, which has
That's
been a
right.
stalwart there, okay, and has done
Mm.
really well to be there. Same thing happened with the mobile phone world, Microsoft, Apple, Google's Android, etc. With this, if you look at the top 10, 5 out of the top 6 companies today are tech companies. Okay, so
That's
they're
right.
all big tech. So the so-called Magnificent Seven comprise parts of the top 10, right? And so, and I think industry gets reshaped. In this case, most of big industry is big tech. 30% of US capitalization, market capitalization is the 7 companies, 30%. And so those will get reshaped. And we are already seeing that with Nvidia entering into this. And so I think clearly the wars, and then therefore the reshaping of big tech, which is the more important part, which was in the subtext. We've
Right.
already started seeing, and big tech will have a different composition, I think, in a
Right.
few months and years' time. So that's really where it
Yeah.
was coming from.
And you're talking about some really, really hardcore competitors, right? I mean, these are companies which
Yeah.
can really throw dollars and resources
Yeah.
behind their bets. So it's going to be very interesting. There's a
Yeah.
question here from Tanishka, and I'm just going to reply to her. She's saying, "What are the most exciting AI developments Jaspreet to expect in the next 5 years?" And Tanishka, here we're talking about quarter-on-quarter reviews, so we're not going to be talking about 5-year discussions right now. So, moving from this, Jaspreet, you talk about a very interesting one. AI moves to the edge.
Yeah.
And on that one, and I think all of us have been wondering when will really Apple launch its, a refurbish or a revamped Siri, and what's going to happen with this, And you gave yourself a 7 on this. I have some question on this, but maybe you could just give us your sense on what do you think happened.
Why don't you ask the question? I'll incorporate that into my sense also.
Right. So I think the logical question was really about what's going to happen with Android and Apple and Samsung, right? But I think there's this whole thing about the wearables which has been sitting out there. We're talking about the human AI pin. Unfortunately, the launch of it was very underwhelming. And similarly, there's a Rabbit R1 which is coming up. So all about this AI wearable pins. Do you really see them coming in? Because the iPhone and the Android, as we know, has demolished every other device that's out there. So do you see that this might lead to a new surge of wearables, or it's just going to be back to the smartphone?
100%, not even one iota of doubt. Okay. See,
That's interesting. That's a
100%. Okay. And you see, I mean, yesterday again on stage with the Sarvam guy, I was asked to do predictions, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I knew I do predictions. And one of the ones I said was AI on the edge. And not funnily, gratifyingly, Vivek also agreed with me. And by the way, Vivek is into my mind, one of the top 3 AI guys in this country today. Okay. And so, so he totally agreed. And so I feel, kind of justified here. So look, the AI moving to the edge has already started. It's not only, it started even with incumbents, with Samsung's AI phone and HP's AI PC, and Microsoft has announced, and this all happened after my predictions in the last 2 to 3 months. Okay. And Microsoft's new AI Surface 10 with the AI chips, NPUs, Copilot, okay. All that is happening. It's happening super fast. And it's happening with the innovators, like the ones you mentioned. And sure, Rabbit might fail. Sure, AI pin would just, that doesn't matter. If there was no Palm, there was no iPhone. Think about it. Okay. Palm failed. Okay. But if there was no Palm, there was no iPhone. So the initial set of devices, as with innovation, you don't make the first one Rabbit is made and the Rabbit overpowers the world. Not going to happen. But and if if you look at the chip semiconductor world, Qualcomm is super busy making edge AI chips. Okay, and they're very good at it. ARM is doing the same thing. Okay, designing the same thing. So everyone, it's a given that AI is going to move, and then on top of that will be the small language models, quote unquote. Okay, which would sit on that. Gemini, when it was launched, had the lowest version, Nano, was actually meant to be on the edge. There's enough and more happening, which is kind of so again, it's a no-brainer prediction. Okay, and whether therefore, will it we move away from the iPhone world? Absolutely. It'll also be that we will have a new iPhone, which will be a different thing. It could be that also. So it's not that, Apple will die. Okay, but Apple could die because some of these devices are kind of, and we'll do a separate one on that because there's lots to speak about that. And I'm writing an article on that on the post-iPhone, post-smartphone world in a sense. But for today, let's kind of keep it till here.
Right. No, fascinating. I think Apple especially has done a fantastic job of capturing the, what should I say, the personal compute space wherever it's happened, right? Whether it was a mobile, then the iPad, which was a new category altogether. They've obviously dominated personal computers, and it'll be interesting to see whether they'll actually probably be the incumbent grabbing the spot, or you'll probably have the R1s or somebody like that, coming out here. It'd be very
Absolutely.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Apple will kind of, but that 100% certainty was not about the demise.
No, I know. I hear you. I think the
Yeah,
AI pins will happen, and it's going to be
yeah.
very interesting to see whether the Samsungs and
Who
in
does
fact,
it?
I don't know if you remember, there was this a long time back. There was this young kid, an Indian, a kid of Indian origin. I forget his name. He
Pranay.
eventually joined. Yeah, that's right, right. And he had this whole wearable around his neck,
Yeah.
and he joined Samsung, right? I mean, so they were thinking about this 10 years back, right? In some ways. But the technology is really coming now, right? So it's going to be very interesting. Yeah. I'll just gloss over the race to regulation. We've discussed it. You gave us a
Yeah,
4
yeah.
on
I think
10.
we should. I think
Yeah.
we'll pick up the interesting ones of the
Yeah.
10.
So I was surprised you gave yourself a 3 on 10 on future of work.
I mean, one of the things, and maybe it had to do with personal experience, which should not be the case, but
Right.
I'm not very overwhelmed or super impressed with Copilot so far. Okay, to me,
Yeah.
Copilot and Microsoft's Copilot was probably the biggest product and use case of Gen AI and everyone, and it's like super fantastic. But I've not been able to make it work, very frankly. But forgive
Yeah.
me, as I go around talk to multiple companies, none of them are exceedingly excited about it at this point of time, and they find the pricing also very high. I think
Right.
maybe Microsoft. I mean, I think Microsoft done the right thing by acting like a startup and putting it in without really making it enterprise, super foolproof thing that they usually do. But I think they have also overreached by pricing it super high, probably under pressure to, show the world that they can make money out of generative AI. And I see some. I think therefore, it hasn't really shaken up the world of work in the first 3-4 months. Sure, some of the other things have, ChatGPT in itself has, and some of the GPT based things have, but it's not like a revolution at this point of time. It's
Right.
still very tentative. I would have expected a little bit more, and that's Google has not done anything so far. Okay,
That's
their
right.
docs, etc. Nothing which has kind of forever. So that's why
Right.
I'm a little underwhelmed.
Right. In fact, I was thinking about this point, and my thought process was that whenever you look at these guys just adding this as a feature, we probably may not necessarily see a behavior change much. I don't think so. We're kind of getting at a PowerPoint and thinking differently, or because we're used to working with PowerPoint and Excel in a certain way, right? But I think when you go to a completely new frame, like for example, you go to a ChatGPT 4 and you sit there and you probably sometimes chat for hours, trying to make it do a job better, right? I think it's more also about the context that you're usually used to versus looking at a new frame of reference. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Microsoft has to reimagine its own personal productivity suite ground up rather than just bundling it in that sense.
I don't think so. So if you look at GitHub Copilot, it's not a ground up rethink. It's really working for software. If you think of Firefly, which is the Adobe product, okay, it's not a grounds up rethinking of Photoshop. It's a
Yeah.
re-engineering using. So I don't really think we need to think of ground. Sure, at a point of time with Gen AI based stuff, there'll be many grounds up related stuff. But I think at this point of time, as I say, sprinkling stuff with the magic dust of Gen
Right.
AI can also work. Okay,
Right.
so that's what I
Sure.
think.
Sure. Fair enough. I'll jump the AI and jobs. We spent a lot of time on that, but I found this prediction of yours, open and proprietary LLMs, right? And again, like in my view, I think of really, like you said, the chips as really the what should I say, the infrastructure out there. The LLMs again are the software infrastructure built on these chips, right? But I think more and more people, they're talking about the fact that eventually there's going to be a commoditization because you are looking at the same data sets. The internet is a data set. Everybody has compute, everybody has algorithms and parameters, right? So at some point, the edge that you're talking about, would probably narrow down. Pretty much the way we saw in let's say on the computing, because on the desktop side, people preferred Windows or the OS because of really of the UI that the users want. But on the server side, you have Linux, which kind of rules, in the data centers, right? So I would say that probably I think eventually open LLMs will rule. But your thoughts on that?
No, I think we're broadly saying the same thing. And again, I'll be honest, I'm not a great expert on open source versus proprietary and the wars that happened, etc. I do
Hmm.
think, as you said, we have a lot to learn from what happened at that time. And a
Hmm.
similar stuff would play out this time.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you see my prediction, what I've said is in 2024, these are
Yeah,
predictions for 2024, not for five
that's
years. Our friend was asking. Okay. So I'm saying that in 2024, proprietary will still rule. Beyond that, we don't know.
right. I'll just pause here and take an interesting question here. I mean, nothing to do with your prediction, but he says, like, do you see from this is from Aniket, uh, any contribution, that will happen from AI towards renewable energy, sustainability initiative? I mean, have you ever thought about it from that frame? I mean, we obviously be looking at the players and the immediate domains, but any thoughts on that?
Oh, these things are beyond thoughts. There's lots of action happening with
Hmm.
AI on renewable energy, etc., etc. But remember, this is AI, not Gen AI. Okay, so and AI, as we know, has been around for decades. And over the last few years, pretty much a lot of the big green initiatives, whether they have to do with solar farms or whether they have to do with wind farms or whether they have to do with just batteries or whether they have to storage or whether they have to do with electric cars, Tesla's cars. Okay, there's a huge amount of AI in that to optimize, to make efficiencies happen, to kind of do multiple kind of optimizing algorithms, etc. And I mean, you just take Tesla as an example. I mean, it's a green
Right.
energy company in a way, right? With its gigafactories and it's whatever. And
Absolutely.
AI is kind of, it's also an AI company in that sense. And
Right.
so, it's a it's a dumb thing. Now, obviously, there's lots of speculation saying that a GPT X or number N, whatever it be, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, will solve global warming for us. Now,
Hmm.
that is when we get into, the have a few drinks territory. Uh, but AI and clean energy have been, like joined at the hip for the longest time.
Right. There are a lot more questions coming. They're more on the application side. I'll just try and cover this part. So, big tech, of course, we talked about it. It's
So,
really
so
reshaped.
okay. I mean, I would be very happy to take questions. We can even do a predictions part two if that's what you want
Yeah.
to do. And
No, I think we'll just try and cover this two or three, just bring it to a logical close and then, jump back. So, like I said, we talked about the big tech being reshaped with Nvidia and all these new guys coming up. But let's talk about the AI and democracy. I mean, we in fact, had devoted an entire, slot for that, right? What is your view about this? You've given yourself a 5 on 10. You think that the worst is still to come? I mean, we haven't really
yeah,
seen the worst yet.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's really it. And I think I agree. We spent a lot of time on it. I fear for the worst. Okay,
Hmm.
and I think just because the big elections have not yet happened,
Hmm.
I think to do a first quarter review on this was unfair in a sense,
Right.
and therefore I put a safe 5. Okay, history are that way, but I mean, if the prediction had been, for example, that it will disrupt elections, like etc., etc., I would still say 10 out of 10 it will disrupt. Okay, now
Right.
the extent of it is what we have to figure out, right? And like in the 2016 case in the US and Brexit, it was very clear. The extent was very clear of Cambridge Analytica doing a major role. I mean, doing that. So will it be at that level, or will it be at a smaller, insidious level, which and there'll be other factors which will be bigger than this.
Right.
So I suspect this one is going to. We'll have to wait it out a bit to
Right.
do more thoughtful stuff on this.
So I found your second last one very interesting, and I think coming hot on the heels of the the coup that had happened, I think maybe a couple of weeks back when you must have done this, the Microsoft and OpenAI, right? And honestly, nothing is clear even now. I think while I think the optics are like he's back in the driving seat, and they're kind of clearing up the whole governance issues and everything, right? But I think the question is, will it be the fabulous fivesome of Microsoft, OpenAI, Sam, Mustafa, and Satya? Or is it going to be the fickle fivesome? I mean, how do you see this thing play out? There's too many egos, too
I
many
have
dollars at
said
play.
this one is my most dangerous prediction of all, right? And it's the most exact. So I cannot name names, case mein Mustafa rahega and there'll be
No,
seven of
no,
them.
yeah, but I
So what
think,
I
yeah.
said, if that's the one, right? I've said that either Microsoft will buy OpenAI,
Hmm.
okay, or it will divorce, right? That's I think the broadly the prediction, okay. And
It's going to divorce it with some crazy alimony. I mean, the
you
the
know,
dollar that the
I know, but I don't rule that out to be honest, because you know, I sometimes think that all the moves that Microsoft is making is
Hmm.
for that eventual divorce also towards that.
That's right.
If
That's
you
right.
see the Suleiman thing and you see the G42 thing and
Right.
Mistral investment into Mistral, etc., etc. Okay, I mean they are kind of clearly, de-risking themselves against a possible, and at a point of time, maybe large language models will become a commodity. Okay,
Hmm.
if as people say Mistral or Claude today they say is at the
Right.
same levels of GPT-4, then you know what? Tomorrow you can integrate Mistral also into stuff and work. And so I think at a point of time Microsoft would want to have some full control of its destiny, like Google. Google to me is actually still, even after all the missteps, best position.
Hmm.
They have the best talent, bar none. Okay. They have the full stack. They're the only company with the full stack. Okay. Everything. It's in-house. And
Hmm.
they have the world's best data, other besides Meta. Okay, to train with YouTube and with obviously search and with all of that. They have the best data. They have the best people and they have the full stack. And Microsoft has been just the leadership has been amazing and has done what it's done. But in the long run, they would want to be there with the full
Right.
stack. And the only way to
Right.
have the full stack is to buy. And if you can't buy, then you get out of this relationship and get into another one and buy
Right.
that.
Right. Right. We definitely haven't heard the last on this one, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
still don't even know why the coup happened, and Ilya Sutskever has apparently been missing, right? I mean, nobody really knows what role is he playing. I mean, he's supposed to be the chief alignment officer, so to say, but I don't know. You have any insights on that? Because that's always very juicy to kind of, nah.
I'm about
Well,
10,000 miles from Silicon Valley. I have no.
literally and metaphorically, yeah, yeah. But I think coming to the last one, and my question to you is, you've been a chief digital officer, right, of a large conglomerate. If you were to go back to a corporate job, would you take up the chief AI officer job that you kind of have talked about?
Yeah, I mean, again, the problem with the CDO roles was that they were never really considered very seriously.
Hmm.
Okay, to be honest. I mean, at the end of it, the budget still remained with the CIO.
Right.
Okay. And the CDO had like a very loosey-goosey kind of thing. And many CDO roles were like there just for the positioning part of it. We are also doing stuff. Sure, there was
Hmm.
some which was serious and then you see many of them became CDIO, okay,
Hmm.
or even CDSO, digital and strategy, or CDMO, digital and marketing officer.
Marketing. Yeah.
So it kind of, so, so the, so the short answer, I hope the big recruiters are hearing to, is that yes, if the CAIO role is appropriately defined, okay, and
That's right.
one will have to work through that. We don't know what it means, but
Hmm.
it will mean it would need to include culture change. It would need to definitely have budgets to do stuff. Okay.
Right.
And it would need to be where there's an opportunity to infuse AI in every part of the organization rather than just creating one center of excellence and just doing experiments.
Right.
Okay. So I think if you think of the CAIO role in a cultural context, it would
Hmm.
be far more interesting than thinking of CAIO role in an innovation context, which is
Hmm.
what most people would think of, frankly, and that would not be interesting. And why
Right.
I've given potentially low marks in that is very similar to, in a sense, the work part. In Gen AI, as we know, if there's one constituency which is not as excited as the others, it's the enterprises, big
That's right.
enterprises.
Hmm.
Okay, and they're like, I can't find any use cases, I can't find this, I can't find that. And
Right.
that's
I think the
why
only use case they have is about laying off people using that as an excuse.
it is an
Be it
excuse.
Dr.
Yeah.
Med.
So, and I think and so therefore the CIO thing is not as fast in as as
Right.
expected again. And that's why I've kind of given lower.
Right. And just for some of the recruiters who might be listening in on this, do you think that this is something that's going to be sitting closer to the CIO, CTO role, or closer to the business side of things? I mean, how would you imagine? I mean, where do you see this person spending most of her time?
So the CDO role was 50-50 always and what people did not think of the CDO role was that it was a lot of it was an HR L&D role also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think this role will be kind of somewhere in, so it's not a 50-50 of business and IT tech. It'll need to be, as I said, culture again. So it'll need to be very closely tied to the culture part, which today is seen to be a CHRO's remit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there would need to be some kind of, so think of a triangle with the IT tech and on one and business on the other and HR on the third. I think this would be like the vertex of that triangle.
Fascinating.
The
It's really
vertex,
going to be
the centroid of the
centered of
triangle.
the triangle. Yeah, that's right. No, great stuff. I mean, Jaspreet, this was very interesting, and I think very, brave of you to kind of, especially in something which is so fast changing to kind of take. And I think you didn't do pretty bad. In fact, you were pretty harsh on yourself on a couple of these. But I think from this, moving into a few, and how much time do we have, Jaspreet, to just
Maybe
try and
another
take some?
10 minutes, yeah, 10
Oh,
minutes.
perfect. Great. So there are some questions, and I'm just going to try and convert them into the theme today about predictions, and there's Mariam out here who's saying that, good evening. I want to know, while AI excels at analyzing vast data, can it truly capture the nuances of human intuition and experience that often lead to breakthroughs and, creative solutions? Are there any areas where human judgment will always be irreplaceable? So I think
Yeah,
if you were to just apply your
yeah.
prediction to this one, that'll be interesting.
I don't think so. I don't think it still captures the nuances, the intuition, the learned, lived experience in a sense, which humans have. And that's why, I continue to firmly believe that, it'll be humans and AI working together, which will do the best work rather than AI alone or human alone. Because there are certain strengths which humans bring in, which is still not replaceable. And some of those you mentioned. And similarly, there's strengths in the AI part, which when humans can't do, they can't crunch so much data and know so many things and, do
Right.
things that fast. So I think, and actually, when we think of quote unquote super intelligence, that's what people mean, that, that it'll have all these human things. And now Elon Musk obviously wants to be on the news cycle, so he said it will happen next year, which I like. I don't even know whether to laugh or cry. I think personally think that in my lifetime this is not going to get replaced. And so certain jobs, almost every job. That's why Microsoft is also calling it Copilot. It's not an autopilot, okay, or a
Right.
pilot. So multiple jobs, but especially jobs which are more human things. And you might know and these days obsessed with this concept of being human in the age of AI.
Right.
And so things related to compassion, for example. So if you have a nurse's job, the best robotic robot in the world will not be able to do a nurse's job well.
Right.
And similarly, any such jobs which have a high dosage of human, even a CEO's job. I mean, let's move to a totally different area. Okay,
Right.
there's a lot of empathy. There's a lot of lived experience. There's a lot of judgment that a CEO needs to do, which cannot only be mathematical judgment or algorithmic judgment. Okay, it goes beyond algorithmic judgment. There are calls which would sound completely counterintuitive to a data-driven algorithm, which happen. And so I think these will remain uniquely human attributes for the foreseeable future.
So very clearly, you've gone way beyond quarters. You've said in our lifetime, so that's a long, bet on being human in that sense. Wonderful. There's a question here from Rashi, but I think before that, Jaspreet, how are you going to be doubling down on your predictions? Are you going to be just looking at the same 10, or will you probably have new parameters coming up in the next one?
I've put the 10 in the beginning of the year. So one of the things, let's see how the year unfolds. Maybe I do just a quarterly update, or maybe I close these 10 in June or July of this year and write a new 10 for the
New 10.
second
Yeah,
half of
yeah,
the year.
yeah, yeah.
Let's see.
No, because I think this question from Rashi is a very interesting one. You might want to consider this in one of that. And it says, will AI influence the future of transportation, particularly in the development of self-driving cars and drones. So we've been on the, what should I say, on the advent of, drones and this for a long time, right? And do you really see finally happening? Um, you know,
So Gary Marcus, I would encourage Rashi to follow Gary Marcus, who is brutal about how these predictions of uh, cars and driven by AI are going to happen next year. They've been happening next year every year
for the longest, yeah.
for the longest time. Okay. And we've reached a stage where most companies have given up, including
Yeah,
Apple. Okay.
that's right.
Or defunded or given up or just made them hobby projects. If you ask me honestly, I never understood the real rational reason to have driverless cars. Okay, even while the whole world has been talking about it. Electric cars, sure. Energy efficient cars, sure. Okay, semi-autonomous, sure. Okay, I think the only reason people were doing autonomous cars was because some Silicon Valley billionaires saw those as amazing toys. Okay, and the only rational reason which was given was about reducing accidents.
Hmm.
Now, you can reduce accidents by three ways, which is much more effective and cheaper and possible than doing this. Okay, by doing semi-autonomous, for example, you can build in huge amounts of technology to prevent accidents. Okay, if you focus on that rather than self-driving. Second is you can work on non-tech ways to look at human behavior and using nudge theories and many other ways to reduce, like we did with smoking, for example. Okay, we did that, right? It had nothing to do with some AI coming in and reducing people smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And the third is, frankly, most accidents happen in the developing world. And
Yeah.
there's never going to be a driverless car in the developing world. Okay, it's illogical. The road systems don't exist, and people need jobs. I
Yeah.
think this has been a big, one of those things. Even flying cars, I get. Okay, which we do. Okay, but driverless cars, I think if they die a natural death, I will not be mourning them, to be honest.
Hmm.
However, we must acknowledge that what they have done, like many such projects do, they spin off technologies which can be used in many other places. Okay, like Formula One spins off technologies which can be wars, and the war weapons do that. And so I think it's not a wasted effort. There'll be lots of the lidar technology can be used for multiple things, and but I think we should just say, okay, fine, we played around for this. Let's keep it to the side. There are many other problems we need to solve, bigger ones.
Right, right. There's an interesting one here from Anand, and I think you would probably have a very interesting context on it. Especially with the experience of being a CDO, and you talked L&D being a very important part of what a CDO does. So it says, Anand says that will we see advancements in AI-driven personalized learning platforms and educational tools to cater to diverse learning styles and needs?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I think this is the biggest promise of AI.
Yeah.
This and personalized education and personalized healthcare. If these two things happen, and hopefully, nuclear fusion, okay, if these three things AI can help us do, which human beings haven't been able to so far, okay, I think we can safely say that AI has been worth it with all its problems and its costs and everything. And education of the three, I think, is the most feasible, most immediate. Khan Amigo, if you have heard of Khan Amigo, Khan Academy is GPT-4 driven personalized tutor. Is good and is one of the first efforts in that direction. And I think again, if we look at it beyond the Silicon Valley construct, in places like India, for example, with millions and millions of uneducated children, schools without any teachers, frankly, or with teachers who really are there just to collect the salary. And the craving for education which families have for their children, the penetration of mobile smartphones, the penetration of digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. I think if these products come up, the distribution of these, which is the more difficult thing, is much more easily doable and is necessary and and can happen. And in many ways, COVID taught us to do remote learning, but with horrible devices and the pedagogy and everything. It was not really, it was just the physical stuff converted to. But
Yeah.
it really can happen that you have that. And I think that will be cracked also. I think Amigo is the first big step in that direction. And I think we absolutely, and it will be a great thing to happen.
Wonderful. And there are a couple of, just to kind of conclude, there are a couple of two pretty smart questions, and I'm not able to make up my mind whether they're smart or they're tongue in cheek, because you've got Raj and Viren asking that how do we ensure accountability and transparency in AI-driven verdicts? And usually you got Viren asking how accurate have AI predictions been compared to human judgments in various domains. Yeah. So
the second one is very interesting, and I don't know. Maybe we should say, who is that? Viren was asking that.
Viren Chabra. Yeah.
Viren Chabra. Viren, it might be good since you have the curiosity. If you have the curiosity to go look for AI predictions, which AI has made, people have published it, and see what has really come out. I haven't found them. I would love to have them, but I don't have the time to go look for them. So maybe Viren, you can, and then you can possibly communicate to us, and we'll put it up the app, and we'll kind of
maybe we'll have him drop it out here on the community. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe talk about it next time. Okay, if you kind of find something, so that will be great. And so Viren, that I've thrown that right back to you. But on the other one, the verdicts, again, verdicts not in terms of these predictions. While probably your question was similar to Viren, I'm taking it in another way, where AI-related verdicts and literally verdicts have been tried has been in the legal area.
Yeah,
and in courts, in juries. There's this big debate and a great area of research in terms of whether an unbiased AI can give better outcomes of legal verdicts in a courtroom situation than a 12-member bench of human beings who would clearly be biased. I mean, today I was reading our friend Donald Trump, it's in one of his 300 cases. And in one of them, the juries it's getting delayed because they've not been able to get a jury which can put its hand on its heart, everyone, and say, I'm unbiased, this way or that way. Okay. So they have not been able to collect a jury because Trump polarizes people so much that you either love him or you hate him. And so there's no one who's unbiased towards him. Okay. And so will an AI be able to do that? Until now, the results are not very encouraging.
Yeah.
Because these AI judges and their Compass, and there are a few of these AI engines programs which are in that area, go obviously train themselves on earlier data which human beings have done, and you find that they do tend to be more biased against the people of race or a different race or a different gender, which human beings have done, and so they kind of reflect those biases still.
Gemini was an example of that.
Gemini is an example, and also some of these are black boxes, so they will not be able to exactly explain why they said what they said, other than the fact that the previous data kind of decided that decision. So that's where it is right now.
No, great. I think we're going to be on the hour. So, thanks so much. Jaspreet, is always enlightening and fun just chatting with you. Couldn't cover all the questions. So, if you have time, just glance through. I think there are 4 or 5 that I missed out, but I think it was wonderful. And I think Viren, I think it's a great idea from Jaspreet to kind of have him come back with some 5 predictions that AI did, right? Or anything. And we'll try and pick this up next time. Yeah,
absolutely. And I guess one of the other things, Vivek, is we're probably going to be meeting more every fortnight. So just let the community know. It gives a little bit more time to think of these different questions, as well as to be and interact with you on the app, which I've been neglected in doing just because things happen so fast. Okay, so we should kind of look at having interactions not only every 15 days here, but in my area to look at how some of the comments, etc., are happening, and so look forward to see everyone.
We need to be getting a Thinkly AI agent for you, right? To just answer those queries soon.
Absolutely.
Right. All right, Jaspreet, thanks so much. Yeah, great chatting with you.
Bye bye. Same here, and thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.